All right, so it's going to be really interesting today. Um, so our pre-conversation has sparked this conversation, and we're going to tackle. And I don't mind. I mean, we're not going to call any names, but this was born out of two pastors having a intense moment of fellowship, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So, and I don't mind, because we're not naming any names, but if they happen to listen to it, you know, I don't want to. I don't want to add any mystery to it. Yes, we're talking about your situation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um,
Bringing them in without them knowing, bringing them onto the podcast
yeah,
without them.
yeah, exactly. But the question I think is that they raise is very very pertinent. And I think it's very important, especially to anybody that's looking to build or make disciples. Um, you have to understand some of the dynamic of this, and not let our traditions, not let our own biases. Is that a good?
I think that's a great word
Okay. Yeah.
because that's kind of what your biases and your traditions are mingled together to create your buttholish attitude. That's a nice way of describing it by
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
of
Um,
my paraphrase.
but but really, I mean, um, if it doesn't come packaged like I want it, God, then I'm not going to take it. Is basically the way you're saying it. And first, and before we started talking, I wanted to make sure that we're not just pulling opinions, you know, out our tush, that we're this is biblical. I mean, what we're going to talk about is biblical. Uh, it's not something that I'm not describing it the way I'd want it to be. I mean, technically, if I made it like I wanted it to be, it would look a lot different.
Heck yeah. I mean, and maybe we could say that it's the standard that we see Jesus
Yes.
use,
Right.
or the standard the Father and Jesus are implementing and
Right.
showing.
Right. And I don't know if we've been clear about the question is, but here's let's just make a formal question. So where do disciples come from, and how do you decide who to disciple? Is that a good question? Is that the question, or do we need to add anything to that question?
I think that last question's the question we'll wrestle with.
Okay.
I think that's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So so let's describe the situation generally. Not
Okay.
specifically. So I'll let you describe the situation. What's the wrestle? What's the tussle? What's the hubbub
So
bug?
and it's not just in this one group of people. I think it's all throughout. Usually, and not just to throw pastors under the bus. I think we
No.
all are somewhat challenged by some of the people that come our way
Yeah.
in this process. And so it does seem to be more of a challenge in the institutional church system setting
Mm-hmm.
where everybody looks the same, everybody dresses the same. You've got the cookie cutter mentality. You go into any church in the United States, you probably go into any church in many other countries, and everybody's going to look similar. They're
Mm-hmm.
either going to be black, they're either going to be white,
Right.
they're going to be, they're going to either, if it's a suit wearing place,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of men are going to be in suits. If it's more casual, a lot of people are going to be. So, like, it's you take on the same characteristics of that place you're connected to.
Yeah.
And what happens often, I think this is where the you asked me to explain it a little bit, and I think this is where the issue is that we want people to come through a system or jump through certain hoops before we want to sit or before we'll be willing to sit down with them.
Yeah.
We measure them before we disciple them.
Mm.
I don't know if we see Jesus doing that at all.
Well, and what you're describing, my dad always used to describe it as like as every church or every body of believers or fellowship has a personality, and
Correct.
and they
That's a
and
good
they
way.
they have a way that they conduct themselves. They have an attitude, and those type of people collect together. And just like you said,
Yes.
there'll be some that want to be formal and they want to dress in suits. Fine, I don't care. And then
Yeah.
some that want to come in shorts and t-shirts and sandals. Hallelujah. Again, I don't care. Um, but but they clump together, and just like and if you become a leader of those that fellowship and you're not of the same personality, then that's when a lot of friction. And you've seen that where a new pastor will come in and he'll try to change things to his way of doing things, which rubs the personality of the
Yeah.
of the congregation, and it's constant friction. Everybody's always complaining. Well, they're doing this, or it's too long, right? So, if we transfer that idea over to disciple making, then what are we going to be looking for? We're going to be looking for people that look exactly like us, that think exactly like us, have the same kind of bends, and God, and so here's another good question: why would God bring you somebody that is not part of your fellowship, that's not part of your system, or
Your
does
circle.
or doesn't
Right.
want to be in your system? Because not being in your system doesn't mean that they're
Yeah.
not a believer
Yeah.
or not worthy of being invested in. Woo.
That so that the last part, say that again.
That they're man, why you do that to me? So
They're not
they're not
worthy of
worthy of you
being.
being invested in. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the nucleus of the problem.
Yeah.
That's when you
Right.
strip away all this stuff and you get to that, and it's like, I don't want to spend my time
Mm.
with somebody that's not like me. It's somebody that rubs me wrong, somebody that looks different, thinks different. They might cuss, I don't cuss. They might drink, I don't drink. They might, I mean, we could go
Or
that, you could go 20 other ways.
let's hit the big one. Let's hit the big one. All right. They're not even a believer.
Oh, yeah. I don't think they go to
Oh, they
church.
don't go to church. They don't believe in God. They don't profess Jesus at all. I can't
Yeah,
disciple them. Au
yeah.
contraire, mon frere. I think you're wrong on that. Okay. Now I know. I think I just heard heads exploding all over the place. And because how can that be? How can that be? See, this discussion, and I think the reason I was kind of whenever you started describing this, I was kind of like, yeah, we need to talk about this, is because it's not it's not our country, their country, uh, any just a few countries. It's everywhere because I've ran into this question multiple times, and one poignant one in India where they were complaining about a guy who wouldn't join any one particular church. He would rotate around to different churches, and which I thought was fantastic.
Yeah.
And
Sounds like Jason Dillingham.
but the pastors were like, yeah, godless man. Hi, Jason. Hi, Jason.
Yeah, we love you, brother.
Love you, man. It was all in love. But they were complaining about this guy, and as soon as they got through you know, and they wanted to know my opinion. So it wasn't like I was trying to give them a biblical necessarily, but I did. I said I looked at them really, really kind of side of the eye, and I said, where is it in the New Testament that any believer has to be a member of a church? Has to have a authorized stamp of I'm a member of this fellowship. You can't find it. And when I
Correct.
said that, they went, ah. And then I asked them, I said, how many members do you think I have it? How many members are part of the fellowship I belong to? And they were like, oh, and they started giving me numbers, and which number, I don't care about the numbers, but they started giving me numbers, guesses. And I said, well, thanks for your guesses, but zero. We have none. No members. And they looked at me like crazy. I said, we don't have membership. And they were like, why don't you have membership? I said, do you know how much destruction membership causes? Because if you're a member of this church and God's literally calling you to another fellowship,
Yeah.
then what do you have to do? You have to sever, you have to cut off, you have to tear away, and I didn't want that. So we said no membership, and you can move in and out of this thing as much as you want to. If you feel like taking you somewhere else, hallelujah, bless you. Hope God does great things through you. And what freedom it gave.
Yeah.
So now let's look what had happened with Jesus. The scriptures that we were talking about before was
Yeah.
John 17, John 6, and you look back to when the calling of the disciples, you know Jesus called his men, and well, John 17, what was that,
2.
John 17:6, was it 2?
6. Yeah. Yeah.
um
2 as well.
yeah, he called them the men thou gavest me,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
the men you gave me. Now, that means God brought them, and we were kind of joking a little bit, you know, when Jesus saw these guys, and maybe there was one, maybe there was two, maybe there was all of them, where Jesus looked at him and went to the looked at the Father and was like, "Get one, get one."
This is going to be fun. I
Yeah,
could hear him saying, "Oh, this one's going to be fun."
thanks, Pop. What are you
Well,
doing to me?
we brought up that point about just I would even say if you're not having a giggle in your spirit sometimes when these guys show up over the course of you beginning this process of the if you're not giggling in your spirit like I think we're trying to say about Jesus and the Father,
Yeah.
like this is going to be good, then I wouldn't necessarily question your disciple making motive. I would maybe question what where you're looking,
Hmm.
like the idea of I've said it before to other pastors. Um, it'd be good for you to try to find somebody outside your church to disciple.
Yeah.
And now this is where the rub comes, is because I say I'm identifying myself as these pastors because I am.
Hmm.
Our bent is to invest in something that's going to give us a reward back. The problem is when we invest in people and we want them to give us something back in the system, that's an issue.
Hmm.
That's the problem. Because I know a lot of pastors that have tried this disciple making thing, and they're not going to go get the one that God brings them. They're going to kick them out or get rid of them because they're too detrimental to the system. So they're going to go get somebody comfortable.
Hmm.
They're going to go get somebody that they're looking for, people that look like them, think like them, act like them. We have to be careful about that.
Hmm.
I'm not saying that that might not be the guy we're looking for, but the guy Jesus brings or God brings right into us that's rough on the edges, that's this out of the ordinary,
Right.
that kind of person is easily kicked out of your mind because they might not, as a pastor, benefit you in your system.
Right.
We can't build a guy to benefit us in our church system. We build a guy to benefit us in the agenda that Jesus gave
Mm.
us, which is reach the world.
Right.
Now we bring them in, that there's going to be an investment because there's generational production
Right.
there, as Paul to Timothy, to faithful men, to others also. But even saying that, I go back and let's not just make it about the pastor. Let's just make it about the uncomfortableness of what disciple making often does for the disciple maker.
Mm.
It is uncomfortable
Right.
very often to
So
disciple the guys that God brings you.
I'm going to probe your statement a little bit. Okay.
Mm,
So
have at it.
all right. So what is the benefits of getting somebody outside your system? And you've already kind of talked about the dangers, right? There's one danger that really comes to my mind, is possessiveness. If he's in your system, right? Because you brought him in to benefit you, and if you invest all this time in him and he leaves you, then you feel like you've wasted your investment, which brings what? Anger, resentment, bitterness, all that stuff.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
breaking a fellowship, right? But what would be, from your perspective, because that's why I want to probe that, what would be the benefits of bringing somebody in from outside that would be beneficial to a pastor type?
Um, and them still, like, and when let me uh ask this question,
Mm.
which, are we still kind of on the idea of, like, the pastor's still the pastor of the church,
Mm-hmm.
and he's disciple making, and he understands that that person might connect with them
Mm-hmm.
at their church, but we're not building them to be better members? Or is that what
Well,
you're?
well, you're building them without any expectation of
Yes,
them
to
joining
give.
to get them. What does that produce in a pastor? What does that produce, from in your opinion? And well, from your standpoint, what has it produced in you? Was really what I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah. And for me personally, I can think of a few people that I've invested in, that are literally have zero ties to Catawba Baptist Church,
Mm-hmm.
where I've been for, like, most people that's listened don't even know the longevity, but I'm going on 19 years at that church.
Mm-hmm.
And so over 19 years, I have been in the process of disciple making
Mm-hmm.
there, which is unique and very odd, and very low percentage of even the people that are pastors that even hold to this strategy of Christ,
Right.
let alone the longevity of being there. But I preface, that's why I'm prefacing all that with, to say this statement: it is safety for the pastor very often to invest in something outside of their own thing. So
It's interesting.
it's, well, the safety is, let me be careful when I say this, but if I get fired today, a lot of what I've been doing in disciple making will not go away with Catawba Baptist Church.
Mm.
It will continue. So I'm not putting all my eggs in one basket,
Mm.
which is, that means that I'm locked into. As long as I'm a pastor at this church, everything I invest in is here. Thank God that's not how Jesus did it.
Yeah.
So the benefit is, I think I can talk about the benefits of discipling somebody outside your church, discipling somebody outside your circle, discipling somebody way outside of your realm of comfortableness. I think the benefits can be many,
Right.
but the one is safety. The second one is, um, I would even say that there is a great freedom in that.
Mm. I was thinking the same thing.
There's a great freedom in that. Now, you and Jason taught me that early.
Mm.
You both saved me from the institutional destruction that can come when you're building from within to go out,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like when everything's got to funnel. Y'all taught me early. It's like it doesn't have to funnel through this. Yeah, you can make Catawba Baptist Church a great foundational place to propel people out,
Mm-hmm.
and we're actually doing that now more than we've ever done it before,
Mm-hmm.
because we brought in a guy that I've discipled.
Mm-hmm.
He is now in our system,
Yeah.
but he would tell you the exact same thing I'm telling you right now.
Yeah.
He doesn't need the church to reach the world.
Right. And you didn't bring him
And
in as, oh good, I've invested in him and now I'm going to pull in my dividend.
yeah, no,
Had
no.
nothing to do with that. It was completely something else.
Yeah, and I mean, I would have to be, I would be lying if I said that I don't look forward to being able to miss a couple Sundays and not have to pay somebody to come in, because he can preach.
Yeah.
He's a great expositor.
Yeah.
He's probably a better expositor than I am.
Very thorough.
And you know, you've heard him
Yeah.
teach.
Very thorough.
So it's like there is a reward for me bringing him in, but he and I both are running just like this, side by
Yeah.
side, and we're going after the world.
Right.
But he was an outsider,
Yeah.
and he's an outsider today.
Yeah.
When Sunday rolls around, you look at him and it's like I'm just sitting there thinking, the dude don't really even fit in, and he'll tell you he don't fit in. He don't feel like he fits in, and I don't care. It doesn't bother me one bit that he doesn't fit in.
Yeah.
I don't because I'm not trying. I'm not playing the game.
Sure.
I'm not playing the pastor game. I'm not playing the. I'm trying to build the biggest church game.
Right.
So the benefits are the safety, but the freedom
Yeah.
that comes with. And you said this earlier, and I'm gonna defer this back to you,
Mm.
because I think this is a great place to implement this, because disciple making is always a two-way street.
Yes.
It's never you follow me. It's just one way. This is
Right.
how it's going to be. So I defer back and say, with what I answered about the question,
Mm-hmm.
my question to you is, what ultimately could be the benefit of the disciple maker to get somebody that is like a tax collector,
Mm-hmm.
like a just an old drunkard fisherman that's out here? Like, what's the benefit? There's
Yeah.
got to be some benefit to that.
Well,
So,
I think even when you look at Jesus's, the story of Jesus in the Gospels, nobody stays static in this. So
mm,
so if you are a pastor type, or if you're a heavy hitter, whatever you want to call it, you're a skilled believer, or you're a professional Christian, whatever you want to,
yeah,
then you think you're going to stay the same, you know so the disciple coming to you is, he's your assignment is to change them into more of what Jesus was, in personality, and into Christ, which are two different ideas. There's Jesus and there's Christ. So you your job is to transform them, but in the act of transforming them, you're transformed as well. So if there's something in you that God knows you need, He may bring you somebody that just totally ticks you off, or somebody that is the mirror opposite of you, uh, just to accomplish some things in you. So if you're constantly around that same personality of the institution or your fellowship, and I'm not, I've said it 100 times, I'm not against it. I don't, I'm not trying to
Yeah.
blow it up. It's just that you have to be real about it, which is there's a personality, there's a way they like to do things, and when somebody comes in and doesn't do it the way they always do it, it just causes a big old brouhaha, right? So God, in His wisdom, will say, "Hey, you know what? Uh, Bill's real rough around right here, so I need to bring this person in just to knock the edges off, and then make him more smooth, more usable, more skilled, right? And if you're constantly looking for people that look like you, it, it's not going to you're not going to grow. You're not going to become better. You're not going to have the skill set that you need. So it's imperative.
I got my hand up because I'm sitting there like you're saying all this, and it's like bam, bam,
Yeah.
bam.
Yeah.
The last 3 years, dude, is like
Yeah.
has for me with the people that God's brought me. Sonny is a mirror freaking image of me.
Hmm.
Like I look at him, and yeah, we're different backgrounds and completely different backgrounds, but like personality, passionate man. Like when we get in that zealot
Yeah.
zealous mode, we two together could destroy stuff.
Yeah.
But when he and I have been so connected over the last 2 to 2.5 years, I have seen so much of me in him,
Mm.
and he has seen a lot of himself in me.
Mm.
And so over the last 2 years, we have not necessarily, we have sat down, we have transferred information, but he's ready. Like he's one of those that's polished. He's been to school, which is not a requirement for disciple making,
No.
but he already knew a lot of scripture.
Right.
And now it's just me slightly nudging him and directing.
Yeah.
I don't have to do a lot, but while I'm doing that, I'm realizing he's a lot like me, and because he's a lot like me, I have to treat him a lot like God has treated me over the years,
Right.
which is sometimes with love and sometimes with
A ball
like the
bat.
first couple 6 8 months, he and I were like this. I mean, and it's combative, and
Yeah.
he would tell you that we were in each other's stink
Yeah.
all the time, but thank God we were faithful to see each other through
Right.
and be honest. We
Right.
were honest about how we felt about each other, and I think when we did that interview with him, I said some things, and after I said them, I'm like, I don't take back what I said,
Hmm.
but I think it might have been heard wrong
Yeah.
when me and him were meeting, and I
Yeah.
had to go a little early. I think it would be taken wrong. I don't think he took it wrong,
No.
but he's a challenge,
Sure.
and he's a challenge to a lot of people. The
Right.
same way I'm a challenge.
Sure.
I've been a challenge to you and to Jason and to Jason White. I mean, like I had to have three guys disciple me, and Sonny's the same way.
Sure.
He's this big bull. If we go
Yeah.
back to the priesthood
Yeah.
idea, he's got a lot to offer,
Yeah.
and that means that he's gonna have to have a couple guys
It's a
handling
tag
him.
team. Yeah. Which is
That's
another
right.
concept. Which is another concept. A misconception. But going back to the, and we need to mention that here in a minute. But I want to
Okay.
go back to
Subject.
what you were saying, huh?
Yeah. I got off track a little,
No,
but
no,
anyway,
no, no. It's good. Um, but there was a time when I was investing in more people outside of my fellowship than I was inside the fellowship, um, and that wasn't, and the only reason that happened was because God had begun to free me up from the pigeonhole of the institution.
Yeah.
And that's and really the enemy would love for you to just stay in your institution or your fellowship, because that really knocks out a lot of possibilities. Um, but one of the biggest things it did for me was freedom. Was I was free from, you know, making people do what I wanted them to do. You know, like when people say, "Well, I don't want to do that," I'd be like, "Well, don't do it." Okay, fine. Well, I don't, you know, or if they, even if they were saying, "Well, I'm not, I don't believe that this disciple making is as imperative as you make it out to be." Okay, well, fine. Help yourself and not do it. You know, it, it just it just didn't it just wasn't a hot button for me. And if people disagreed with it, it wasn't a hot button. And that's part of the, like you, and we do this all the time, especially Americans, when they think of finance. Nobody would ever put 100% of their money in one place. It's just too vulnerable, right?
Yes.
Diversification is always the best investment, right? So we do the same thing here. We're diversifying where we're investing. And I've had this question come when we mentioned it before. I don't think we mentioned this yet, but can you disciple a lost person? You know, that is a huge um, rub point, right? Well, and some people will immediately come back. No, you can't disciple a lost person. I beg to differ with you. Jesus did. He absolutely did. He had a disciple that was not a believer.
Yeah.
I would argue he had 12 that weren't believers to begin. So he literally started with non-believers because they just thought he was a rabbi. They didn't have any idea who he was.
Well, and even whenever they finally figured out he's king, think about their warped perception of what the king is,
Yeah,
of what his kingdom was going to be. You know, like it's, yeah, we're like, we're going to kick butt. Like we got, that's why we got these zealots over here. Cause yeah, we're going to eventually have to go in here and overtake Rome. And
yeah,
like, we're going to be sitting on the right and the left and we're going to be first and second. And Jesus is like, no, that's Gentile talk.
yeah,
You know, we don't talk about who the greatest is. We don't worry about who's first and who's second,
nah,
because the first will be last and the last will be first. And so then it's like God, like Jesus. I think throughout the book of Matthew, it does a beautiful job of Jesus constantly showing the true heart of his disciples.
mm,
Like Matthew is a genius when it comes to, I think, all the way up until the point of the reinstatement of John 21, where Peter is reinstated. I literally, this is my opinion, I think that the majority of those guys were like, screw it. It's over. It's done. This wasn't even real. He's dead. He said, this is all, this is preposterous. This is
which would
beyond
make
us.
them
Let's just go on.
non-believers, right?
Yeah.
In a sense, it would make them non-believers.
Well, and I mean, if you look at it from a rabbi standpoint, it was like, I'm done. You're done with me. There's no hope. So yeah, your point
Yeah.
is, I would even add another gentleman I've been with the last year and a half, that when he came, I don't think he had an I don't think he had an ounce of truth in his body.
Mm.
There was a spark, and God had initiated that. And I could have said, "Hey, dude, we got to get you saved. We got to get you baptized. We've got to get you to become a member of Catawba Baptist Church."
Mm.
But instead, literally almost a year later, he was baptized.
Mm.
Now, hear that. Not you, Bill, but anybody listening. almost a year later, he finally came to an understanding of what baptism was,
Yeah.
the enlistment, the identification of who he was, buried in Christ in the likeness of his death, raised in the glorious likeness of his resurrection, over a year after we started to sit down together.
Right.
So I would even say discipleship, true discipleship, has almost a better opportunity of saving someone's soul
Right.
than just going by and saying, are you going to heaven or hell when you die? I don't know. Well, let me tell you
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
way you can go and pray this prayer with you, and boom, you're going to
Yeah.
heaven. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm not saying that doesn't work. But to your point of what you're saying, again, this gets me fired up because I've been a part of this. I've
Yeah.
been a part of this system years ago, and I refuse to join this. I don't play this game,
Yeah.
so I don't give altar calls. I get rubbed about that all the time. It's not that I don't think that there's people that are lost, and it's not that I don't care, but I'm not the one that holds the ability to bring people to heaven. I don't have that ability.
Right.
That's something sparked by the Holy Spirit
Right.
of God in the heart of people. And not a I can come up with 10,000 great questions. The Roman road, the faith, the all these acronyms and all these evangelistic tools. I can use all of those
Right.
on people and they still might not be a follower of Christ.
Well, and for whatever reason, I guess it's the enemy's brilliance. I don't want to give him too much credit, but that people see evangelism and disciple making as two different events, but they're not two different.
Or
They're
at
one.
odds.
Yeah, or
Or at
not.
odds.
You can either do this or you can do that, or you can be focused on this one or you can be focused on that one. No, they're the same. They're part of the same. Uh, they're part of the same car, truck, vehicle.
Heads and tails of the
The
same coin.
coin. You can't have one without the other. One
Yeah.
produces the other. One feeds off the other. So to fully evangelize is to make a disciple, and to make a disciple is to evangelize. So you can't. I wish there was some way to knock that out, but you know what? It's a lot easier to just say, "Hey, I went out and I shared the gospel," or you basically told people about Jesus, and hey, turn or burn, um, 20 times today, and one person, you know, prayed a prayer, and I have no idea where they are now.
Yeah.
You know,
How often does that
oh
happen
my,
on Sunday?
it yeah, or my dad was probably, I won't say the most skilled, but he was pretty skilled at that. Pulling on emotions
Yep.
and making you panic. Um, you
That's
know,
a funny word. I like that word.
well, it is. It's if you
Yeah.
leave
I don't
this,
know if I've ever heard it like that.
if you leave this
Yeah.
congregation right now, you leave this building right now, and you don't know, and you go out here, you could be killed at any moment, and you're gonna wake up in hell, and that's a true statement, but I mean, but why are you telling them that? Is it really concern, or is it, I'm just trying to get you down this aisle? I'm trying to get you to publicly. Now, so if I'm making a disciple and they don't want to speak the name of Jesus in public, or they don't want to speak the name of Jesus outside of a church, um, yeah, okay, you're I don't know that you're a believer, because it sounds like,
Yeah.
I'm not saying you are, I'm not saying you're not, because I can't know one way or the other, but yeah, we focus on the wrong. I think we focus on the exterior versus the interior way too much.
Well, I'll tell you something funny. I went back and listened to chapter 6. You're teaching
Mm-hmm.
on Tally Ho.
Oh, yeah,
and you make that comment.
I do.
You make that, because the title of that is God's
Oh yeah, yeah.
multiplication
Table.
table.
Yeah.
The idea of doing it different than what man would expect
Mm.
to do it. And we won't go into all of that, but you actually make that statement. I think it might be at the beginning, and it could be at the end. It's one or the other, but you make that statement that we try to put evangelism and discipleship often at odds, and that's detrimental
Mm.
to the strategy of Jesus,
Yeah.
because along the way, if you have any kind of understanding of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, which is they all four wrote a gospel. It's not that there's four gospels, but they all four wrote an account about the good news of Jesus, and
Right.
all four wrote in completely different ways
Yeah.
with different ideas and different perspectives. Yes, Jesus is the point, but they have different flavor. And
Yeah.
if you read and have any kind of knowledge at all about those four accounts of the gospel, what you see is progressiveness.
Mm-hmm.
You see progression, but what the progression is not with Jesus, although there is some progression with him.
Sure.
And then you're like, well, that's blasphemy. He's God. Yeah, he was God, but he was also humanity, and the
Yeah.
reason that he represents humanity is so we can come in and be a part of what he's doing, because he's fully expecting us to do that. But we also see progression with the disciples.
Mm-hmm.
But as you see them progress, it seems like they're doing this and then they're down.
Mm.
And then and especially with Peter, and then
Yeah.
this and then they fall. And then it's like, okay, well, were they ever saved? Salvation was not the main point of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. But we make salvation the main point. Salvation is not the main point. And then the crowd goes, I can't believe he just said that.
Yeah.
It's not. It's not according to Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John.
Right. Yeah.
The four accounts of those books, the last 10% of each one of those books, if that, Mark doesn't even have much about it, is about Jesus dying for the sins of the world.
Mm.
The nucleus, the fullness of the first three-quarters of all four of those is about him pouring into a bunch of screwed up, worthless, dropout, no good guys that
Right.
look nothing like him except for they have a Jewish nature
That nobody wanted.
that nobody wanted,
Yeah.
that nobody even wanted to represent them.
And just by the evidence of the what's in the Gospels, only 2 out of the 12 were even joined to a rabbi at that point.
That,
Only 2 out of the 12. The rest, the other 10, nobody wanted to invest in. So God may
and
bring
John
you.
the Baptist wasn't the most popular rabbi.
No, and John the Baptist, yeah, and he was, yeah, and so what Jesus got wasn't probably, uh, what any other rabbi probably wanted, you know,
That's right.
because John the Baptist was, much different, obviously. So, so the point of this whole conversation is, how do I say it? Don't pigeonhole yourself and don't limit what God can is wanting to do through the disciple making process in you or in the people that's around you, because you may be stepping over. We call it. I say this all the time, especially with corporations. Um, we feel like we're stepping over dollars to pick up nickels, right?
Hmm.
You may be stepping
Hmm.
over somebody who's much more valuable than the person that you think is uh, going to be the
Going
next
to bring
guy.
you,
Yeah.
yeah, or going to bring you some kind of a greater, and I would even go as far to say this: there's some guys that I'm discipling that I wouldn't parade around in front of my Catawba Baptist Church people.
Uh,
Just wouldn't do it.
right. They're that
And and
rough.
and Like they may attend every now and then, they may not. But there's some guys that I'm discipling that I have been involved with over the years that I have poured into and invested into. No way, no how. I would not parade them around in church. But that goes back to your point. Am I pouring into them for my own desire to build my own empire, or am I
Right.
pouring in them for the desire to see them transform with the information over time, not the snap of the finger, let's get them saved and then we can start doing something. It's a slow process.
Right.
Jesus demonstrated that. Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John demonstrated that these disciples were progressively discipled and changed.
So
And
yeah.
it takes time.
So think about, it makes a lot of sense when you really step back and look at it. But which would you rather be? A person who has this ministry that is imploded upon itself and only looking for those that look like them or that will get in on their rules, all right? Or a ministry that is spreading out over and over again, but nobody sees it or nobody knows it's
Hallelujah.
there.
Yeah.
You know,
And even if they know it's there, they can't quite figure it out. Like they don't understand it. It's great to be misunderstood.
isn't it?
It is an absolute blessing to be misunderstood.
And that's what gives me chuckle all the time because it how many times has it happened where um, people get connected into the disciple making process and they don't even realize how vast the network is. And then when they start asking questions, they start interacting. They're like, "Well, I know that person. Well, I know. Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. That makes sense." And they start seeing the connections, and they're like, "Oh, wow, I didn't realize how vast this network was." And you're like,
And it's not focused on one church. It's
"No,
not focused on one. It's not funneled.
yeah,
The pigeonhole. It's
right,
it's not a funnel. We can't be the funnel,
right,
right? We have to live the opposite. That often it is you turn the funnel upside down, and the smaller part is the last where the liquid comes out is the smaller part.
mm,
But if you turn that upside down, then and you start, it's a lot harder. But you start pouring the liquid through the small end, and then it starts spreading like that. And that's what Jesus does. He turns things upside down and does it backwards.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
we talking about John 6, and ironically, the one that you were talking about was John 6:36, right?
37, yeah,
Wasn't
but
it John 6? Well, or was it 7
37,
or
yeah,
37? 37, yeah. Yeah, and if you notice, right before that statement in John 6:15, it says, Jesus therefore perceived that they would come and take him by force
mm,
to make him king,
mm,
and he departed again into a mountain himself alone.
mm,
And then you're back to 16 through 21, you're back to the focus of the disciples. So think about what Jesus just did.
yeah,
The funnel was saying, we want everything to run through this man. He's our king, he's our guy. He just fed a multitude of people. And then all of a sudden, Jesus is like, this ain't what I signed up for. We're
yeah,
going to flip this baby upside down. And we're going to go back. And we're, again, the funnel not necessarily running through him as much as through the disciples that he was focused on
yeah,
building, not building the empire of what the Jewish people wanted in that day.
right. And the thing that makes people scratch their head about Jesus at that time, and they should scratch their head about us at that. Is okay, Jesus, what do you want from me? What are you looking for that I'm going to give you? And Jesus is like, I don't want anything other than everything.
You.
You,
Yeah.
I'm not trying to fit you into my system. And what does that
Yeah.
say? what kind of freedom would it bring to people that have been totally beat the hell out of by the system, for you to say, "Hey, I'm willing to invest in you, whether or not you ever jump in to my system or not." And they'll test you on that, man. I've had that where they were like, "Oh, you want me to?" I'm like, "Hey, man, do whatever you want to do. You do what God tells you to do. If God tells you to do it, fantastic. If He don't tell you to do it, I don't want you to do it." And
You know, I had a conversation last week
hmm,
with an individual, will not name names at this point, but he's done with this process.
hmm,
Says he is. Um, I can't obligate him.
hmm,
It's not what can happen.
yeah,
So I basically we met for um, an hour and a half, 2 hours the other day, and in a roundabout way, in a short version, I said, brother, you have got the freedom to walk away right now, never come back, never call, never text, never sit underneath any of this teaching, strategy, building process ever again. You have the freedom to do that.
hmm,
I'm not holding a gun. God's not holding a gun to your head. And I left it at that. Now, of course, we know there's consequences to that.
sure,
And the consequences, and I explained to him the consequences. I said, you're to that point where you know enough that it's going to destroy you
hmm,
eventually. It will be the haunting dream.
yeah,
But I don't think there's been one other instance where, and actually two, it's just so happened more recently in the last couple years, that I am giving away a lot more freedom than what I used to,
hmm,
because I'm a motivator at heart. I put people on the spot. I'm like, let's go jump, let's go, let's go.
right,
Like, you with me? Yeah, yeah. And it's like we're moving under Derek's passion. We're moving under Derek's force. And then I look around and I'm like, there's no spirit movement in them.
hmm,
They're just following, which is okay for a time.
yeah,
But eventually, I ran on you and Jason for years,
sure,
dude. I ran on y'all's passion. I ran on y'all's truth. I ran on y'all's, like, I'd take y'all stuff all the time and make messages out of it. Still do. I'm just a lot more. I'm a
more
lot better at
honest,
it.
a lot more honest about
Yeah, more. Yeah, yeah, a lot more honest. But
it.
like you've got to be used like that. You've got to be like Jesus. You've got to give yourself away so much that somebody realizes what they're actually forfeiting when they walk away.
Mm,
And it's okay but it's time for him. If he listens, great. If he doesn't, I'd tell him the exact same thing, because I can be very blunt sometimes. But I told him, I was like, dude, it's time to crap or get off the pot.
mm,
And I said, you're at that point, but at the same time, you can get off,
mm-hmm,
and God's love will not change. God's favor and grace will be there. You will just wrestle with this decision the rest of your life, because I've been there. I know that. But that's the freedom that has to be given, and I don't know if that freedom can be given as much if they're tied to your members, if they
well,
if they're a member,
yeah,
I guess.
well, and you know this as well as I do, that we project, and this is one of the dangers of projecting the system, the institution, or or connecting God with a fellowship. Okay, when you connect God with a fellowship or with a place, um, and people are sick of, they're not sick of God, they're sick of the thing. Okay,
Yeah.
and but because you have so connected it, and I'm not saying you're doing it that we're like some sort of dastardly villain that is trying to hurt people. We we just do it instinctively because that's what religion does. It tries to bind God. That's what religio means. It means to bind. So you're trying to stick God to a system and saying if I do this system, then God's okay with me. Okay. Well, then if people get sick of the system, they feel like they either have to stay and be miserable, or I've got to leave and I got to leave God there because God can't go
Mm,
with me.
yeah. Mm,
So we inadvertently make them make a decision to leave God as they leave the system. And the reason I say that is because I experienced that myself. I got sick of the system, but in my mind, God was so tied to that, I felt like that I'm just going to leave God there too, right? But but that is the exact opposite. So if you give people freedom and say, listen, God is God is involved with this fellowship, but God resides outside of this fellowship. So wherever God's going, I suggest you go. If you how how many pastors would stand up in their pulpit and say, "Listen, if God's taking you someplace outside of this fellowship, please go." They're not going to do it. They're not going to do it because they're afraid of the repercussions. Just like the people that are trying to build the thing, they would probably swallow their gum, in the middle of the statement of, oh my God, what are you saying? We need more people, not less. So in discipling, you've got to be really careful not to, because it really is easy to build a kingdom to yourself, to
absolutely.
build up your own name, to build up your own reputation, right?
Much easier to do that than to build it for his honor and glory.
Because you gotta be open handed, man. You can't be grasping. Just like
You
with
got, and yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just like with information. How many pastors have I ran into that will not divulge how they get something or how they do something, or you know, uh, or if you run into a pastor and he says, "Ooh, make sure you come Sunday," you know. I got a fresh word from God and it's going to be good. Well, what is it, Pastor? What are you going to preach on? Oh, you got to come Sunday. You got to come Sunday. Well, why don't you tell them right then? You think they're going to hear you better on Sunday? They may not even hear you on. They may not hear you now.
That's right. That's a good point.
So if somebody says, "Hey, what are you going to preach on Sunday?" or "What are you going to teach on?" or "What are you going to," I tell them, "Well, this is what I'm going to do, and here's the scripture. You want to hear the points? I'll tell you the whole sermon right now, and then
Yeah.
you can come back Sunday and hear it again. You got a better shot on
Yeah.
Sunday if you hear it now."
Hallelujah.
You see
And
what I
then
mean?
let's repeat it and talk about it after.
I think that's hilarious. We think because somebody heard it something once, they heard it all. No, they didn't hear you. They barely got anything you said.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Well, and then you
yeah, getting off a little bit.
go back to the concept of like the open-handedness, the uh like where I'm at right now, I'll just be honest as a pastor. I don't think anybody from my church even listens. Heck, I don't even know if anybody, I mean, whatever. But over the last year, man, like, dude, we have doubled numerically.
Really?
Yeah. Um,
That's cool.
insane. Yeah, and it's like I hear the the voices from the the people, and it's like, man, you're doing something right. You're doing like I've done something to get, I'm a good communicator. Like
Yeah.
I'm skilled at
Right.
communicating. That's I wasn't like that before.
Yeah.
That's God, disciple making, you, Jason. I can list a number of people that I can attribute a lot of that
Mm,
to, but it is hard for me where I am. It's actually, it would be better if there was only about 30 or 40 coming,
mm,
like it was a couple years back. And now you know the weight of performance grows
mm.
as you see the numbers come. And so I present a message like I did this past Sunday. And of course, it was heard in so many different paradigms, but I basically told them to leave. Literally, I said, this message is, I'm getting ready to, I'm getting ready to cut down, I'm getting ready to cut down a lot of people. And I said, it wouldn't surprise me if half of the crowd's here next week. And dude, it was a butt torching rip of a message. Like it was like something that we would say on the podcast. It was very
Wow.
blunt, honest, and my intention was not to turn people away
Right.
from the church. My intention was to get people to see that this is not reality.
Right.
What you're seeing here on Sunday is not reality.
Hmm.
You are being invited into something bigger than a membership. You're being invited into something bigger than a once in a week 1 hour event.
Right.
You're being invited into the kingdom to be it, to bring it, and to
Right.
build it, and you have that opportunity. And then I was talking to Sonny about it yesterday, and we were texting back and forth, and I had a guy respond to me, and I'll say exactly what he said. Damn good message.
Mm.
That was I was like, I've never had a single person say a bad word responding. But then, and immediately, what I wanted to say was, what made it so good?
Mm.
Because it's like, well, what made it so good? Because this one's supposed to rip your guts out. And of course, I haven't had, but now this guy and I have talked, and he's joined. He's been baptized. Like God's doing great things through him. He's kind of a system institutional guy. He don't mind jumping through hoops, things like that. But I want to lean in as he leans in and say, do you really hear what's happening? Do you really understand what is being asked of you, not by your pastor,
Mm.
but what's being asked of you through the word, by the Spirit? And I just, it's frustrating, man. It's a frustrating system to be involved in
Right.
with the information that I
Right.
have. That
And and I want to be clear too. Uh, I don't care how you organize yourself. I don't care what you do. I mean, I have no preference on any particular denomination. You know, what I'm interested in is truth and perpetuating grace and freedom to people. Not license necessarily, but license is kind of involved in grace. But I'm not trying to say,
it's into the cake.
huh? Yeah,
It's
yeah,
baked into the
right.
grace.
Just like you were saying before we got on here, do we believe everybody's going to heaven? No. Do we believe that everybody's going to be a disciple? No. No. But I mean, Jesus was clear. These things are hard to find. The way's narrow, and we think the way is always salvation. I think it's bigger than salvation.
Got that right.
Yeah. So,
But
so don't
and
get hung
maybe we
up.
can say, huh?
Don't get hung up. On any one belief system.
Maybe we could even say this kind of as we wind down.
Mm-hmm.
I think the word wrestle is a good word. We've talked about that a lot. I know Jason Dillingham and I have going through a lot of this kingdom stuff, and I would even say if you're not wrestling with the truth that's being presented to you, if you're not wrestling with the people that are starting to show up around you, you might need to question
Mm,
not necessarily salvation. You might need to question your motivation.
mm,
You might need to question, am I missing something here?
yeah.
Because I'm gonna tell you, dude, I think the game, the wrestling match, has gotten bigger. The things I'm wrestling with have gotten bigger.
Mm,
The actual wrestling has gotten greater, but it's like it's necessary.
mm,
Like if we've got to wrestle with this idea, and I love it when somebody is wrestling, not necessarily with what I've said, but with how we've represented the truth, how I've taught the truth. And when I see somebody wrestling with that, arguing with me, I'm not offended by that.
mm,
The only way I'm offended is when they're trying to uphold their opinion to where, yeah, some of mine might be an opinion, but it's based on the actions of Jesus
right.
and the truth are lining up. So I would say this disciple making stuff, man, if you are not being challenged, if you are not wrestling, you ain't in it. And that's a pretty bold statement. And I'm not saying you're not in heaven.
Yeah.
You are not, because this thing will rip your guts out, man.
Yeah.
And
It's a
and
challenge. Huge challenge.
it's a beautiful sacrifice.
Yeah. It is.
Goes back to Romans 12:1 and 2.
So, so do you think we've covered pretty much the gambit of the question?
Yeah, I think we we chased rabbits, but I
Yeah.
think the rabbits were, I think they were there for a reason,
Yeah.
and I feel that I'm very zealous about this.
Yeah.
This is something
Yeah.
that
Well,
God has.
it's hot on the press, man. Hot off the
Yeah,
press.
it is, it is,
Yeah.
it is.
All
But
right, bro.
I go back and I defer to this. I'll say this before we go.
Okay.
I go back and I told this to Dillingham the other day. I said, Bill has modeled this beautifully, and the modeling of this
Mm.
and not this. Although I know you've wrestled with it, we talked about it. I know
Mm.
it's a part of my struggle as well, but
Sure.
I'm learning so much more to be generous with the truth, generous with with where I am, so I'm not holding on to something so I can build my own thing. But you know, Jason of course agreed, and
Mm-hmm.
you know, you and him are more beneficial to me over the last 15 years than probably anybody else. And
Mm.
it's not because I'm some great guy. It's just in my personal life. And then people are like, well, who the hell's Bill? Remember, they know Jason, they know Bill, like the old timers from 19 years ago are like, yeah, we know Bill.
Yeah.
Bill's the
Yeah.
one that banged on the
Yeah.
pulpit.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a wacko.
Yeah. But anyway, I say that, and that's a compliment, but also, you know, man, that's just
Yeah.
something that you modeled well.
Well,
You still model that well.
the only reason I model anything like that is because that was what was modeled before me,
Yeah.
and that was so attractive to see somebody that was not grasping or grabbing and completely open and free with everything they had, and I'd never seen that before, and I was like, wow, what a way to live, and I'm just dumb enough to go, well, it seems to be working for him, so
Yeah, and it's like, well, what's working out?
yeah.
Well, nothing real good according to the world
Yeah,
standard, but
exactly.
for the
Yeah.
longevity of the kingdom,
Oh,
yeah.
I would trade in a heartbeat. Uh, I would trade Herb's influence over anybody else I know.
Good.
All right, brother. Well, I've
Yeah, that's
enjoyed it.
good.
All right. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
See you, man.